I'm just laughing at that intro. It's maybe a bit over the top, but just can someone let me know if my mic is on? Anyone? Hello. There we go. So, hello and welcome to the first public live stream in, I think it's been over a year now. I think the last one was in May last year. But for those interested, I do a monthly one for members. That's the only time I'll plug the membership stuff, but there's a members one that I do with a few people show up. So I have been doing that, but the public ones I don't do very often. So I thought I would, because it's been quite a while since I've done anything on this channel. But a few people are here, so thanks for coming along. The channel's not quite dead yet. Let's see. I'm getting used to this new streaming software, so I might make mistakes. But brightest I've seen a room. Yeah, well, when you're north like this, when it gets to this time of year, it will be light till about 11 or 12 at night. And then it will get light again about 3:30 or something. So it'll probably be light for most of the stream. Yeah, it's not even getting close to dark yet. But yeah, so for this, it's just basically any comments about anything, especially Tolkien related. I'll see how long the stream goes on. I like to answer everything, and I'm really slow at going through all the chat, because when I answer people's questions, and I take quite a while, because I don't want to just say no and then move on to something. And I've also got a few questions from members lined up, and I'll take ages to answer them, because I like to give a bit of detail for members' questions. So I will say, if you do leave a question, or even just saying hello, I've noticed this sometimes, by the time I reach you, you might have already left, because it'll be quite a long time till I reach that chat. Depends how many people are here. But don't think I'm ignoring you if I don't say hello back straight away. It just takes me a while. I like to give kind of good answers if that's possible. So a few people I've not spoken to before. Thanks for coming along, and loads of familiar people. Oliver, of course, our mod. Sari, Nicholas, Daniel, Ben, Crafty Spirits along. So I might as well just start then with one of the members' questions. And like I say, leave any question you want, any comments about anything, and I will get to you. But I thought I might as well start with some questions and just let the chat build up a little bit. And just that quick question there: keeping to books or new film territory? Anything. If you're honestly wanting to ask questions about Tolkien films or even the TV show, you can ask. I might not give great answers, but there's no restrictions. So let's start with, let's see. Is that noise? See, like I say, I'm getting used to this software and it's making noises at me. I'm going to start with a member question from... I need to stop that noise. Hold on, just give me a minute. Maybe it won't make the noise if I don't go off that page. Right, so this is from Patricia, who's currently in the chat. Callisto. And I've got a character restriction or limitation there, so the full question is actually on the Discord, so I'll give it its due and not just summarize it. So basically asking, in Unfinished Tales, it says the following. Now at that time, the chieftain of the Ringwraiths dwelt in Minas Morgul with 6 companions, while the second to the chief, Khamûl, the Shadow of the East, abode in Dol Guldur as Sauron's lieutenant, with 1 other as his messenger. Then in the footnote it says, and it may be noted that in a rejected version there was only 1 Nazgul in Dol Guldur, not named as Khamûl, but referred to as the second chief, the Black Easterling. So the question is, if the only mention of Khamûl as an Easterling is in quote-unquote rejected text, does that mean he wasn't? Or are we to assume that Shadow of the East means Easterling? So, first of all, there's no definitive answer here, right? If there was text from Tolkien that said, this is the answer, I would just give you that, right? But there's not. So there's a few things we need to break down here. And it's kind of in my opinion. But the Black Easterling and Shadow of the East are the exact same to me. We obviously know black it's not referring to a physical thing. It's not skin color or anything like that. It's a characteristic of this man, as in darkness or something like that. And if you break it down that way, the black and shadow mean the same thing, really. It's talking about him as a figure, and Easterling and of the East are the same thing as well. So I know of the East here is part of the title, so it's going to be capitalized, but Tolkien almost exclusively, when he mentions the East, as in the East with the capital E, is talking about Rune, which just means East. And that means Shadow of the East is this evil or dark man from Rune. That's what that means, which is the exact same as the Black Easterling, I think, anyway. And that's my opinion, okay? I don't know if you agree with that, Patricia, but the interesting part here, though, is when you're talking about rejected text. So I just want to clear that up, because you've obviously read the passage, but it's very important to give context here, because I know there's other channels and there's people that write articles online and everything that never give context for this stuff, and they would reject the Black Easterling as a name because it's from text that was rejected, even though the reason that text was rejected had nothing to do with this name. So as you said in your original quote, he's talking about Khamûl, the Shadow of the East, being in Dol Guldur, and another Ringwraith being there as his messenger. But then that was rejected, and it meant there was now only one Ringwraith at Dol Guldur. And it doesn't really matter that Khamûl's having his title changed here. That's not the reason it was rejected. So I've got absolutely no problems with Khamûl being called the Black Easterling or Shadow of the East. Both of these terms and Khamûl himself are only ever referenced in Unfinished Tales. They don't appear anywhere else. And you have to give context for the reason the text was rejected. If the text was rejected because of this name, it would make sense to start questioning things, but I don't think there's any need to do that. And others, I'm not appealing to authority or anything, but like Wayne Hammond, Christina Skull, and Hostetter, these kind of scholars have all been asked about this stuff as well, and they all say it's weird that it's even a debate. It's Tolkien didn't reject that this man was an Easterling. He's a man from the East. It's the same thing. And it's just a different title. Maybe when Tolkien was rewriting that passage, he just thought Shadow of the East sounded cooler than the Black Easterling. And that's what I actually think. I think Shadow of the East sounds better. But the rejection was to do with the placements of the Ringwraiths at that time. It was not about his actual title. And what I find, I'll finish with this in a second, but I find it quite funny that a lot of people who obsess about canon and rejected text and everything do call him the Black Easterling, but there's never a bit of text that actually says Khamûl, the Black Easterling. That's never put together. It's Khamûl, the Shadow of the East, or the Black Easterling. They are the same figure, but it's weird that they put that together. And that kind of thing happens with the Witch King as well. That's just a title, it's not a name, but the Witch King is never called that in the main Lord of the Rings text. Fellowship, Two Towers, Return of the King, he's never called the Witch King. He's always Chief of the Nine or Lord of the Nazgul. He's called the Witch King of Angmar in a very specific part of history in the appendices when he was fighting Men of the North in Arthedain. And that's when he got given that kind of name. And it just shows that when certain people give titles, it ends up becoming the way we all call it. And in this case, it would be Peter Jackson in the movies. He calls this figure the Witch King. And now everyone calls him the Witch King. And it should be Lord of the Nazgul, really. But I'm guilty of that as well. But hopefully that's answered your question. And before going on to the next one, I'll see if there's any comments. And then I'll get to the next member's question. So in relation to this, what we're talking about, what language is the name Khamûl actually from? We don't know. There's no translation or anything from this name. It's a complete mystery. Some people, just for ease, think that Khamûl translated would mean Shadow of the East or something like that, but we don't know. It's honestly one of those, if anyone tells you the answer to it, they've made it up because we don't actually know. So yeah, before I jump on another members one, there's just a question here I want to go through, which happens to be about adaptations. So let's give this one a shot. Do you have a film director or showrunner in mind that you think would do a good job for once at a Tolkien adaptation? And a quick side question, if you could hit a button that would stop all adaptations from being made in the future, would you press it? No, I wouldn't press it. Even though, for example, the Peter Jackson movies, this might upset a lot of people, but I don't think they're great adaptations, but I think they're great movies that are just influenced by Tolkien. But I don't rate them too highly in adaptations. I think there's a lot of stuff that was missed or that I'll very arrogantly say that I don't think Peter Jackson got. But they're great movies. It'd be a shame if they didn't exist. And even though the Hobbit films sucked and the Rings of Power show was really bad so far, I don't want people not to enjoy them or anything like that. I'm not that kind of person. Like when I didn't like season 1 of Rings of Power, and I didn't really make videos about that or anything. I think I had like one live stream where I took questions about Rings of Power, and that's all I ever talked about. You still had people that were like, if you don't like it, don't watch it, which is a really stupid comment. But I'm taking that advice for season 2. I'm probably not going to watch it. And if people enjoy it, that's brilliant. But the problem is, if you keep making bad ones, when will there ever be a good one? It's very difficult, because I think a good Tolkien adaptation would require loads of money. But when you put loads of money into something, you have to kind of go in a certain direction. And you're stuck with making it like a big blockbuster thing and not what it's really all about. It's a shame. I don't think you can really give them 500 million to make a true vision of Middle Earth. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't push the button. But I wonder if we'd ever get a good adaptation. But I'm not really bothered. I'm not really bothered about that. It doesn't really bother me that adaptations aren't very good. It's a shame that for some people that's all they know about Tolkien, and I wish they would maybe read the books. But if people enjoy it, like I say, more power to them. So I don't have a film director or showrunner that would do a good job, because I don't know that just enjoying Tolkien is good enough. Because Peter Jackson said he loved Tolkien, and I believe him. I believe that he'd read Lord of the Rings and really wanted to make the movies and that, but there's quite a few questionable choices and misunderstandings about the text, and it's not just enough to like Tolkien. But before anyone says, it's like, well, could you do a better job? Well, of course not. I don't know how to make movies, but yeah, I'm sure there's someone out there that would absolutely be great at doing it, but I don't know. I don't think it's possible with the way these films are made and the money that goes into it and the need to get that money back. And it means you're never going to get real kind of true Lord of the Rings on screen or something. I don't think that's ever going to happen. And yes, as Joseph says here, agreed, adaptations can help bring a lot of people to the books that might miss them. Dune right now is a great example. I've met several of my students who are interested in reading Dune now. Yeah, and that did happen with the Peter Jackson movies. Something like, I might be wrong here, but it's something like half of all Lord of the Rings copies that I've ever sold or something were after the Peter Jackson movies. So that's great. It's, like I say, it's a shame though when a lot of people, it's all they know about it, and they then make really shit YouTube channels. So let's go back to another member question. Okay. So non-Tolkien content on YouTube channel from Joe. So again, the full thing. Well, no, I don't even need to read that. It's essentially, now that I'm back on this channel and not on the other channel, and the name's been changed and everything, would I do non-Tolkien videos on here? It's definitely possible. I've not ruled it out, but I'm struggling at the moment to get Tolkien videos out, and I think some people might have misunderstood when I was talking about not doing Tolkien stuff as if like every second video would be something else. It's not really. It was just having the freedom to do that. It would have to be the right thing that I'd be really motivated to do. And still, it's Tolkien I want to make videos about. And if there were other videos, out of 100, there might be like 2 or something that aren't Tolkien. It might end up being like that. So there's definitely other authors and other stories and everything I like. The big one, as I've said in other streams before, would be H.P. Lovecraft. I think I could make videos about Lovecraft stuff. It'd be quite different from the Tolkien ones, but you'd be able to read a lot more of the text because there's no copyright worries. I'd be able to read huge passages or entire poems or whatever, and how they tie in with the whole mythos and what I think about them, what it is I like about them. I quite like the idea of being really personal about them, which is always one of my big criticisms about Tolkien YouTube channels. I don't really know what any people think about Tolkien. They don't seem to share anything like that. It's all just lore stuff. I don't know. It doesn't matter if you've got 100,000 or 1,000,000 subscribers. I've no idea what your favorite chapter is or why you like reading Tolkien or what you actually think, which is quite boring, in my opinion. I'd like to do that with not only Tolkien, but if it was something like Lovecraft, I'd like to talk about that and even the real world stuff. Well, Lovecraft's got a lot of baggage, to say the least, and I don't mind talking about that at all. So it'd be something like that. And there are other authors, but I'd say my first attempt would probably be Lovecraft first, and then see how that goes. But there's loads of other stuff. I like Edgar Allan Poe and I like Michael Moorcock. I love to talk about Elric of Melniboné or something like that. That'd be quite cool. And if people who are here just for Tolkien stuff didn't like it, it'd be fine because there'd be far more Tolkien stuff. This would be quite rare to jump to something else. So hopefully that answers you. It's possible and it probably will happen in the future, basically. And just having a read down. Hero of Old, I did see your first comment. You don't need to repeat it. I'll get to it. So that was another member's question. So let's go to the comments again. Ben's thinking that the Witch King's probably an insult. Yeah, I think a lot of these names and titles that are given to the evil figures are given by enemies. Morgoth doesn't call himself Morgoth. Even we're talking about Khamûl, it's the Black Easterling or Shadow of the East. They might sound cool to us, but they're kind of insults as well, aren't they? Like, evil figures don't tend to call themselves evil names. It's a bit like Saruman. I know I've made a video about this, the whole Saruman of many colors idea, which I love talking about, but Saruman didn't call himself Saruman the Black or something like that. He doesn't think he's evil. Why would he give himself an evil name? He thinks many colors is a good thing, the breaking of white. Sauron, despite all the debate about the Mouth of Sauron and all of that, I'd say he wouldn't call himself that. It's the abhorred. It's a bad name. So I kind of agree. Witch King sounds really cool, but would he call himself that? And Hero of Old, you don't have to apologise, but I'll answer you now. Sorry if it's not relevant. Oh, you like to ask me what software I use, don't I? I use DaVinci Resolve. How do rights work with starting a Tolkien channel? Using images, quoting him, etc. seems like a lot of red tape. Well, there's a lot of successful channels that are more successful than mine that burst through all that red tape and break all the rules, and they're fine. But hold on, I'll spend a little minute. It's, hold on, I think someone just said that the stream's appearing hidden. That would be good. Let me just correct that if that's the case. Geez, it is. It's also removed my description as well. It's really annoying. I'll know that for next time. Okay, so that's fixed. Geez, what a joke. Right, so back to your question. How do rights work? So you have a thing called fair use. You can quote from Tolkien. Okay, you are allowed to do that. It depends what you're doing. But the people who just read all of Tolkien that there, they could get into bother for doing that. Depends how you do that as well. But if you're wanting to do the stuff that this channel and other channels like mine do, you are allowed to quote. That's completely fine. Images, that depends. It's fair use could be argued in some cases, but in my case, I tend to go and ask the artists if I could use it. Some channels don't bother and they just make AI images and you don't have to ask anyone. And others use copyrighted images from the artists and never ask them, and they seem to get away with it as well. So I think asking is the best policy. And sometimes it's great. You'll ask an artist if you can use their work, and they'll say absolutely, and they'll give you like high-res images and all of that. And I offer to, and I wanted to do this from the beginning. I did do it from the beginning. I'll put their name on the screen and all of that. But a lot of channels don't do that either. So the best policy for me is just ask them. Just say, I've got a channel. I want to use this artwork. This is how I'm going to use it. Is that okay? And I can give you the credit on screen or in the description, whatever you want. It's the best way to do it. But you don't even have to do it because a lot of channels don't. But for this whole red tape thing, it's not that bad. It depends what you're going to do. Don't just read Tolkien out loud in huge chunks, like audiobooks or something. The HarperCollins and the estate can definitely shut your channel down. And if you're doing it like I do, that's completely fair use. If you're doing commentary or analysis, education or anything like that, you're allowed to quote heavily from text. They can't do anything about that. And I've never had a copyright issue related to the actual content, as in the Tolkien stuff. I've had challenges about artists. Some artists are aggressively anti-using it on YouTube, which I learned the hard way. I was sometimes asking artists and then not waiting for a response because I was just assuming it'd be a yes, which is a bit stupid. But then some of them a few get back and they were like, no, like, take it down right now or I'll kick your arse. No. So do it the right way from the beginning and you'll be okay. And yes, thank you, Daniel, for pointing out that it was hidden. I've no idea why it was hidden. It was supposed to go public as soon as it went live. So the audience has just doubled after doing that. So hello to people that just showed up. That was my fault. I went live, but it was still hidden on YouTube, but it's public now. So before going to another member question, Oliver has asked, what will the first video on the Red Book be? Well, remember, it's not the Red Book now, it's named after me. Now that Eru has sent it back to finish its task. The first video I'm actually making just now is, well, you already know about the Legendarium one because it was on another channel. I am going to put the other two on that I did on another channel. The Gil-galad parentage one and the Aragorn Sauron one. Those are both going to go live. But of course, you'd have already seen them. So the first new one is actually... the first new one is a look at Manwë and Melkor. It's part of San Rikenta, which used to just be an obscure paper, the communication of thought that you would read, but now it's been added to the Nature of Middle-earth. And it's basically Tolkien going through his explanation of why Manwë and the Valar as a whole would allow Melkor to commit such horrible acts. And I've quoted from it in quite a few videos where it's kind of apologetics for the Valar, where I'll say they act this way so that they aren't acting like Melkor. That's like a really big thing. But I think it's one of Tolkien's really great pieces of writing where even if it is apologetics and it's letting evil do evil things, like this problem of evil deal, I really like Tolkien's response to it because it works in his world anyway. So I'm looking at that whole explanation and basically explaining why Manwë in particular, who would at one point have the power to stop Melkor from doing all these heinous shit, why he wouldn't do it, and why that's a good thing in terms of the balance of the world and not having more than one of the Valar actually fall to evil, but still horrible for all the people that suffered under Melkor. I think it's quite an interesting discussion, but I think that will be the first video. It's that or another one that I've been writing. I won't mention it just now, but I'm kind of torn between them. But I think that might be the first one because I think it's a really interesting topic. But part of me really wanted to go back and return to the David Day examination. I ditched that when it was on the Red Book before for various reasons, and then I thought, well, now I can do it. And I'm still really torn about how to go about doing that. I don't want to start... I know David Day doesn't know who I am, even though he follows me on the Instagram page. But I didn't want to cause any weird drama. But it was really a look at why people have a problem with David Day's writing, and almost a little bit of a defense for David Day as well. I feel quite bad for him in some ways. So maybe giving him a little bit of defense for actually going out to write Tolkien stuff, but really getting into detail about what it is that really frustrates me about reading these books. So it might be something like that. I don't know. Maybe you guys will get involved on Discord about what one to go for first. One's like a real personal thing about Tolkien writing and scholarship. Another one's an in-depth look at the motives of the Valar and the handling of Melkor. So I think both of them could be quite good. And I've still got 2 members' questions to go through, but we've got time. We've got loads of time. And sometimes artists won't respond at all. Yes, which is fine. You know, it's I think one of the frustrating ones in this case was that I think I'd written to this guy near the beginning of the channel, and I used his artwork in about 10 videos or something like that. And he responded after about 18 months, basically saying no, and he was really aggressive. I was like, shit, man, if you had said this really early, I wouldn't have used your stuff. But he was like, you do not have the rights to use this. You have to blur it from your videos or take it down, and I will seek compensation on that, which he wouldn't get. He's talking shit there, but yeah, he was quite aggressive, and I was like, I prefer if the really aggressive ones were saying no very quickly, you know. Bassi, I hope I'm saying that right. What is my favorite Annatar artwork? Annatar is a really difficult one to do. I'm always complaining about Annatar artwork because I think a lot of artists miss the point. And I'm saying that as someone who's not an artist. I really wish I could do this stuff, but so I'm not saying their artwork's bad. That's not what I'm meaning. But the way they show Annatar is just wrong, in my opinion. I'm always saying that Annatar shouldn't look evil. That's the whole point. I've said this in other streams before. Annatar is not meant to look evil. That is his entire point. He's also not meant to look like he's wearing a wig. But there's a piece of artwork from, what's his name? It's an artist that I can't use. He said no. Well, I didn't say no, but he took down videos from another channel, so I don't use it. Krabat, right? So I'll see if I can show. Oh no, I can't show it because he says I can't show it. Search for Annatar by Krabat. I think that's a really cool piece of artwork. There is one I can show, which I should be able to just add here. Let me just find one. I use this in quite a few videos, and I quite like it. Just give me 1 minute to upload it, and I'll show you. Oh no, it's too big. Give me 1 second, and I'll just get this ready. This should work now. Still not working. Geez, this is taking its time, right? This will work this time. There we go. If it's going to add it. It's not uploading it. It's really annoying. I'm adamant you're going to see this image because I've talked about it for about 2 minutes now. No, it's not getting uploaded. Okay, so that would be Sauron Annatar from Alvaro Fernandez Gonzalez. I use it in so many videos. So if you look at, let's just see, for my actual main videos, I think it's the thumbnail for a very recent one. The Fall of Sauron. Did he die? Maybe I could upload that image. Let's go and find that. Sauron. Oh, this is useless. Right, so I can't show you. So that's one. We've got Alvaro Fernandez Gonzalez, or Alvaro Fernandez Gonzalez. He's got Sauron Annatar, and it's quite a cool one with Annatar wearing the ring with the shadow of kind of Sauron behind him. That's quite a good one. And I really like the Crabat one, Annatar. Those, he kind of looks a bit creepy, but he doesn't look evil. Too many of the Annatar images are like big red eyes, and he looks like you would not trust him to even enter the room. That's my answer to that. And I'm sorry I took about 5 minutes to not show anything, but the artwork's not showing up. So plenty of more comments, but I'm going to jump to another member one. And this is a member's question about Tom Bombadil, which will be quick because there's not a lot we can say about Tom Bombadil. So the full thing is, did Tom Bombadil wander around, maybe before Goldberry? Maybe this quote hints at it. And now he is withdrawn into a little land within bounds that he has set, though none can see them, waiting perhaps for a change of days, and he will not step beyond them. So, I don't know. None of us know. But when I read your question, I thought of the Elrond quote where he says that when they're talking about Tom Bombadil, and he said, time was when a squirrel could go from tree to tree from what is now the Shire to Dunland west of Isengard. And that's when he'd heard of Earwine, Benedan and all that, Tom Bombadil. And I just think of it as, by the time the Lord of the Rings comes around, Tom Bombadil's set the borders of his land himself as civilization spreads around him. That's how I kind of view Tom Bombadil. He's withdrawing. It's like nature is withdrawing for the spread of the civilized world, and he's got his little region that he's the master of. But in the past, that would have been far greater. So I've absolutely no problem with the idea of Tom Bombadil at one time having far-reaching, I'll say borders, but when nature itself was spread far and wide, and maybe not say invaded, but it wasn't occupied by all these other people, Tom Bombadil probably did wander around, I think. And then as time goes on, a bit like this whole idea of the world settling and the Valar withdrawing to let everything play out as it should play out, Tom Bombadil would withdraw as well. And I'm not saying he's one of the Valar, I'm just saying he would do that as well, as what he was master of is kind of taken over through the natural spread of elves and especially men. So that's what I think. And if you go to like the adventures of Tom Bombadil, he did go further afield, but that depends on how you read that about Tom Bombadil, because that predates Lord of the Rings and everything. But yeah, I don't think if we're getting told he's withdrawn into a little land within bounds that he has set, that implies that that's not always been the case. And if that's not always been the case, he would have gone further. And then you can start to let your imagination run wild with the meat ents and all that stuff. That's quite cool to think of. But yeah, we don't know, but it would be very strange if it weren't the case, I think. So, one sec. Oops. Sounds like I'm going to the toilet, but I'm not. Right. So, loads of questions. How many people are here now? It's went way up after it wasn't hidden. Who would have thought? Right. Crafty. Trolls. Right, so that's an interesting one because you have to kind of bring up orcs, don't you? So people who watch my videos know that I don't necessarily view orcs as corrupted elves necessarily, right? Because just because the Silmarillion says it, because if you read the later text, that Tolkien didn't really think that. But again, I don't have a problem with people saying it, and I have said it in videos, blah blah blah, right? But the idea is that if we go with that, it doesn't mean, this is what I think I brought this up when I was talking about the lifespan of orcs, and people were really frustrating me with the way they were arguing about it, where I was saying that if orcs did come from elves originally, they're no longer elves. They become a race. They're a corrupted race, a fallen race, which has got ramifications, which is the whole point of me saying that I don't think they are that, because Tolkien didn't really like that either. But orcs become orcs. Orcs would give birth to other orcs. And through the corruption of this making of a new race, I was arguing that I don't think they were immortal. Because they're corrupted and they have this lesser life on Earth and all of that. But for trolls, as we know from the Two Towers, there's talk of them being corruptions of Ents. Okay, but I've never read that as Morgoth would have taken Ents and corrupted them to make trolls. I don't really read it that way. It's just more that however Morgoth made these things, he made them in mockery of Ents. That's how I kind of view it. A lot of kind of hand waving. I don't really know how he did that, but I don't think it literally means twisting an Ent into a troll. I think it's the fact that his creatures that were trolls were his answer to the Ents. That's how I view it. And I would say they were made from something else anyway, some warped corruption, and I assume that they would just procreate. But then we have these weird trolls that turn to stone, and do they actually reproduce? You know what I mean? But I don't know. That's, again, they're a mystery as well. And Ben's saying there it was mockery events, but that's what I'm talking about. Mockery events does not necessarily mean trolls are literally Ents that were corrupted into becoming trolls. If you read the way these early shadows that were in the forests tormenting elves in the earliest of days, it was said those things were in the shape of the children, and they would like lure them, and there were corruptions of them. But they're not orcs. It's something else. So it just seems to me that if Morgoth was making, I'm not going to say creating, but making these things, he's using some sort of power to do it, but he's taking influence from what was made with good intentions and purity and all of that, and he's making something that's just a mockery of it. it doesn't necessarily mean that he's tortured one that already exists into becoming this. That's how I view it anyway. But as Nicholas says here, I'll just jump to that comment because I think it's relevant. Never had a problem with Morgoth making things. The creation topic gets heavily misunderstood. Aule created dwarves, but it took Eru to make them an exception to the rule. That's why we say making, though, and not creating. I think creation requires would you say, like the flame imperishable, a soul, some sort of individuality and reason and all of that, a will that's not just subject to someone else's. That's what creation is to me, from what I understand in the text. And making is what Aule did with the dwarves and what Morgoth can do and was allowed to do, which is make things that are not individualistic. They don't have their own, like, they may have some sort of will or like urge to do something, but you can overwhelm it completely, and they don't have the free will to defy you and that kind of thing. They don't have a soul, which would imply something would happen to them when they die and all of that. It's a huge topic, but I've never said that Morgoth couldn't make. Definitely not. And one of my arguments for the orcs would be that it's pretty much his version of the dwarves, which would be puppets. He can so easily control orcs because he made them, and they're basically, he's basically their god, and what he says goes. And when he was taken out of the world, orcs lost the plot a bit. They didn't really know what to do. And, people might debate whether Eru stepped in some way. I'm not going to make that claim, but orcs kind of settled a little bit, but they're so easily corruptible by these big, powerful, evil figures, maybe because of how they were actually made. They're subject to strength of will. But as Marcus says, how do you explain goblins? Goblins are orcs. There's no difference between orcs and goblins. Some people, the whole reason is that when Tolkien wrote The Hobbit, he used goblins most of the time. And when he went on to Lord of the Rings, he said orcs, but orcs are goblins, and goblins are uruks. And uruks are orcs. You start getting into something slightly different with the Uruk-hai, which are orc folk, but I tend to just call them orcs as well, even though there's a little bit of a distinction in that. But don't need to explain goblins because they are just orcs. Some people like to think of them as like the smaller ones and all of that, but I don't really go for that. So I'm just going to jump back up to see if I've missed anyone. Sorry if I have. Just give me a second. There's a good one from Mauro. Could I comment on who Tom Bombadil is and what his role is in Tolkien's universe? Don't have enough time for that, unfortunately. I'm someone who says we don't know. I'm big on that. I do have a big chunk of a video written that's discussing my thoughts on him, but for Marcus saying I missed something, I'll honestly get to it, don't worry. Could I comment? Tom Bombadil. So I'm not going to say what type of being he is, because we don't know, and I really hate that all these channels and people that others look up to for what they say about Tolkien seem to just claim that he is certain things. They do this thing that's well, he can't be this, he can't be this, he can't be that, he must be this. And I really dislike that. I think there's so many spirits and beings that aren't accounted for in the Legendarium that he could be one of them. It's putting him into a box like that's really weak, in my opinion. He could be unique. He could be something like Goldberry. There could be other beings that are like them, like Farmer Maggot was originally meant to be like Tom Bombadil. And I just want to say thank you to Patricia. She just gifted loads of memberships. Thanks very much. It could be like, well, a nature spirit. But what does that mean? It's like, well, why do we need to know what that means? Just a personification of a natural force. What's wrong with that? And I don't need to say he's one of the Ainur. I don't say he's a Maya or anything like that. But his role in Tolkien's universe is very interesting to me. And this was part of what I've written for a video where he's the role of the pacifist. And I think it's one of the most interesting things that Tolkien's ever written, and it's about Tom Bombadil, where he essentially, because this is a live stream, there's loads of comments, I can't talk about this for 20 minutes, but yeah, essentially says that Tom Bombadil represents that the pacifist, to continue existing, has to make a stand, has to actually take a side, hopefully on the side of good, because only through the victory of good could the pacifists still continue to exist, because evil's not going to let them exist. And that's why there's all this talk about Sauron and the Old Forest, and if Tom Bombadil was the last one to stand, he's still just going to be last. He'll still be defeated. And it's, we don't want to say it's not admirable to be a pacifist, but in the face of such great evil, you have to still fight and take a side, the good side. And Tom Bombadil represents just being the pacifist, and there's a whole letter about it, and that's what I talk about in the video. But I think, personally, Tom Bombadil's role in the Legendarium is more interesting than guessing what he is, and that's why I don't really like it. Again, it's people's opinions, but when people skip the chapters or they say he's not important, I think he's really, really important, because Tolkien obviously felt strongly about this stuff, and that's why Tom Bombadil's there in the first place. So let's find this comment from Marcus that I missed. Can't be that far back. There we go. So, did Rune have a kingdom of men like in Shadow of Mordor? To add to that, how much in those games was original to the game? I like those games, but almost all of it's just made up. We don't really... Well, did Rune have a kingdom of men like in Shadow of Mordor? I don't know if it would be like Shadow of Mordor, but they would have had kingdoms, surely. It wouldn't be like the Kingdom of Rune or something like that, but there were men, a whole population of men living in the east of Middle-earth. Great enough that Sauron gifted rings to various figures, and we know that at least one was from Rune. And I'm not going to say who Khamûl was in his regular life, but you'd suspect that he was either a king or someone who could grow into a position of power. And that implies that they would have had kingdoms and all that. And of course they would, because they're not like a rabble that shows up to fight for Sauron. They're an organized force. We just don't really know much about their kingdoms and everything, but they're old. They're very, very old, from if you ever watch my video, the Men of Darkness video, I talk about these kind of figures and how old these populations of men are, and they were around before these Western populations of men. And yeah, it's interesting to think about the South and the East, what their kingdoms were like and everything. But we don't know a lot of information, especially with the East. But it'd be someone would have to make a brilliant case for men in Rune not having kingdoms. It's a given. They have to have. But for Shadow of Mordor, I can't list everything here that they got wrong, but I don't say wrong. They just kind of made up a story for the games. But I would not take what was in those games as anything really Tolkien related. It's kind of extremely created for just the game, which is fine, right? But you're not going to get any of that stuff in Tolkien's books. The main character, the way the ring wraiths are all accounted for, is what figures they were, the places you visit and all this. It's all just made up for the game. Celebrimbor being a weird wraith that gets angry at you, and the forging of a new ring of power and all this. It's fan fiction stuff in the game, but I still like the games. People asking about Legolas. John, Legolas is a Cinder from Tolera with a brown dark hair. I agree. I would suspect that Legolas would have dark hair. Let's see. Oh. Okay. Let's show this one from John. Is it possible that Melkor created orcs and trolls and orcs and trolls and orcs? I'm trying to guess which one I'm missing there. Much the same as Allah created dwarves. His will was necessary for them to act, and that will was part of the power dispersing in the world. Yeah, I think I was saying that earlier. That's definitely possible. I wouldn't rule that out. It's one of the... I think it's one of the best explanations for orcs that isn't related to elves at all. Well, they could be made in mockery of elves, but without actually corrupting elves themselves. Like I was talking about the trolls earlier with Ents. I think Melkor making orcs in the way that Aule did with dwarves, but then allowing them to just exist, and Eru's not going to destroy them, but he's not going to gift them. Maybe that's a debate. But yeah, I think it's a good explanation, and one of the results of Melkor dispersing his power, he's one of his most heinous kind of acts, and the one that Eru is apparently the most grieved at is the making of orcs. And it would make sense that if Melkor is dispersing his power into the earth, that he would disperse it into beings within the earth, and they would do his will, and that his greatest servant would then inherit them after him and know how to use them and all that stuff. And it also explains why good figures who didn't use orcs, but Tolkien talks about it, saying that it would be possible for them to use orcs to actually defeat evil, but they'd have to basically do what the evil figures were doing, and that's an interesting debate as well. But why would another figure of great... Well, we saw it with Saruman. Another figure of great power who's not Melkor or Sauron could still bend the will of orcs to them. We've got evidence of that as well. Another Marcus one. I won't be able to answer all of yours because I think I've answered quite a lot so far. You give people a chance. But I can answer this one. How did Sauron not know that Frodo or Bilbo had the ring? I think this is a movie thing again. If you put on the ring, Sauron doesn't know where you are. That's just the way it is. And the movies kind of show that happening a lot. And I think they maybe explain it away by it's the rise of Sauron. He's specifically looking for it in that direction and he ends up noticing it or something like that. And the ring wraiths seem to be drawn to it and all this. But putting the ring on does not draw Sauron's attention, but it depends where you are and what you're doing, because when Frodo was on Amon Hen, Sauron does notice, but that's Frodo's fault. That's not just because Frodo put on the ring. Frodo puts on the ring, then sits on the seat of seeing and gazes towards Mordor and basically looks into Barad-dûr and draws Sauron's gaze. And Sauron's suddenly really aware of him, and then when Frodo tries to back out, Sauron's like, no you don't, and starts really looking for him. That's Frodo's fault. That wasn't just because he put on the ring. And that's another problem with the movies. They make it seem that's the case, but it's not. The story would be very short. If you put on the ring and you knew where you were, Bilbo would have been caught before Frodo ever got the ring. If you have a question that takes a few comments to type out, that's completely fine. Talking about dragons. I love talking about dragons. Because I do have my own kind of theories about dragons and the Morgoth connection, which you're talking about here. Man, I wish I could pronounce your name. Is that a Turkish name? Maybe I've offended you by saying that, but I don't want to guess. Dragons in Lord of the Rings seem to be very heavily linked to Morgoth. Their eyes are deadly like him. They love gold, which is Morgoth's primary element. The destructive and independent. Yeah, you've pretty much just said what I think about them. I think they're like his greatest creations. Remember when he had some corrupted? They had Balrogs, they had orcs, and but the orcs weren't enough to really defeat elves. So we're told that he got to work making dragons, and they're like his last big thing he makes. I know he ends up having the winged dragons, but dragons were like, he really made an effort over centuries and centuries for dragons. And I think, again, I want to be really clear here, this is just my thought on it, but I think this whole dispersion of his power and all of that must have went into dragons. And I think this whole, like, the personality of dragons, it's like Morgoth. They really act like Morgoth, and especially Glaurung, right? It's I love Glaurung as a character, not just as a dragon, because Glaurung is like Morgoth. The way the words he uses, the ego that he has, the power in his eyes, like you're talking about, it's just like Morgoth in dragon form. That's just what it seems like to me, and that's what all these dragons would be like. I think to make them, to give them such great power and will and all of that, he can't just grab that out of thin air. I think he was just like he would put himself into mountains and the earth itself. Surely he did that into the likes of werewolves and all of that, but dragons, I think dragons got a nice big chunk of Melkor in them. And Glaurung's the big case, like the greatest example of that. It's listen to the way he talks to Turin and how he's so. It seems like he's a bit independent, but he's not. He's still kind of Melkor, but I think that's the case. I think that's what you're hinting at there, and I agree with it. Obviously, I'm just saying that's my speculation, my opinion, but I love that idea. I love that idea that the dispersion of power is not just into Arda's physical matter, but into beings within it, and dragons are the prime example of it. Even long after Morgoth's gone, they're very Morgoth. I don't know what this is in relation to, but maybe because I was talking about. Oh yeah, it's probably because I was talking about the movies and the idea that Sauron would know you're wearing the ring and everything. I don't know if that's where this came from, but the Eye of Sauron, yeah, another poorly represented topic. That's the big one where I say, yeah, you can make the excuse that it's for the movie, blah blah blah. I think, based on interviews and the way they used it, I really think Peter Jackson didn't get the Eye of Sauron. I have to just say it, and I know that's sacrilege because people worship him as some sort of god, but he's not perfect. Tolkien's not perfect. No one's perfect. But I think the Eye of Sauron was the big ball drop. It was handled so ridiculously, and not with the gravitas that it should have had, the terror of it, because you don't see Sauron, even if he's sitting in the tower in the Third Age. The Eye of Sauron, the presence, is how we see him, and it's that ceaseless will and vigilance projecting itself from the tower, not literally, not as a big floating eye, but a will that is never ending. It's just constantly looking for you. And for beings like the orcs, they can see it in their mind. They imagine a being of such like great power being inside your head, and you can't look away from it. That's what the Eye of Sauron is, and that comes from the Eye of Melkor. It was the same idea that the orcs in their their waking mind would see Morgoth commanding them, and it's such a level of corruption that's we almost can't comprehend it. That's whereas you can't escape the corruption, and that's the strength of Sauron's will. And I don't think that was shown in the film. It's quite hard to show, obviously, but a big floating eye that actually moves around when it's looking at it is just so goofy. I'll let them off with I quite liked the even though it was like touching the ring and the eye would pop up, and that was a bit stupid, but I quite liked the visual of the eye in that way, where Frodo putting on the ring, it's sometimes the eye would be there. It really should have been after the Mirror of Galadriel, though. That's such a great moment in the book, and that would have been the time to actually start having Frodo really worry about the Eye of Sauron, because he's looking into the mirror and then the eye appears and it's like as if it's looking for him, and Frodo in that moment would just be absolutely horrified. And this is what the whole deal is. It's a bit like Pippin looking in the Palantir. It's meant to be, we knew this guy was bad, but I couldn't comprehend how horrific this figure is. I'll never get that image out of my head. That's meant to be the power of Sauron's will. And it should have been after the Mirror of Galadriel that Frodo should have started seeing this eye more and really worrying about it. Not a big stupid eye in the tower. I think that was a really poor choice. As well as the Mouth of Sauron. I think that's one of the worst designs in the movie, and it's again taking things so literal. The Mouth of Sauron. He must have a big giant mouth. Come on, give me a break. So I'll quickly go to, and I think I've got how many? I've got one more members question set out. This one might end up being a bit long. Okay. So a bit like the one I started with, the Black Easterling, Shadow of the East thing, this gets debated a lot. And I think it's quite interesting. So I've said there, Saruman appearing at Fangorn Forest in the Two Towers. Why didn't he meet with the fleeing orcs? Why didn't he arrange to meet them outside of Rohan? So I'll give a bit more context there. This question was asked by Beregond, who's still here in the chat. So we need to take it a little bit of time here, right? So in the Riders of Rohan, I think it's the White Rider though. But anyway, Saruman appears near Fangorn and peers at Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas, then disappears when they speak to him. So assuming he was physically present but was able to render himself invisible or cloud their senses to disappear, we'll get into that. Why didn't he just meet up with the fleeing group of Uruks and Orcs, assuming you mean Uruk-hai, who had Merry and Pippin captive? So there's other parts, right? Actually, I might as well just go through it. If he was wandering about, he must have missed the Uruks by hours before they were massacred and the hobbits escaped. It seems like very poor planning. Bingo. If Saruman was free to travel the land unmolested, why didn't he tell the Uruks to hold the hobbits somewhere safe beyond Rohan's borders so he could come and get the ring? The Nazgul who was waiting to take the ring back to Mordor wasn't likely to seek them out, even if Saruman knew of its presence, right? So there's a lot there. But okay, hopefully you don't take this the wrong way. I think there's a lot of assumptions there made in hindsight. It's a big problem. Not necessarily saying problem with you, but a lot of people do this with Sauron for some reason. They'll act like Sauron should know everything we know. Why didn't Sauron do this? Why didn't he do that? But you have to remember that, I know this, you're talking about Saruman, but I'm just making a point. With Sauron, from what he knows, he makes decisions that to him seem really wise, but that's from what he knows, and he's not perfect. He is wrong about a lot of stuff. He's wrong about the motives of others and what will tempt others, what others are going to do. But to him, when he's assessed it in his own wisdom, he's like, this is what they're going to do. They're going to take the ring to Gondor because that's the best place to defend it. I'm going to assault Gondor with a big huge force. But he's wrong. They're not going to Minas Tirith. Even Saruman thinks they're going to Minas Tirith because it's like, where else would they go? They don't think they're going to go and destroy it. That's just... So I think this sort of thing is happening with Saruman here, where it's a disaster. The whole go and get the halflings, bring it back to Orthanc, and hopefully they've got the ring. If not, I'll find out where the ring is. Blah blah blah. It's a complete disaster for Saruman, and there's one big reason for that, which is impatience, haste. Saruman's desperate at this time because, as we know in the story, once this ring is out of his reach, which it is, even when they're bringing Merry and Pippin back, even if they went to Orthanc and got tortured, yes, they'd maybe reveal that the plan was to go and destroy the ring, and Saruman might not even believe it, but he'd maybe think, you're just saying that to distract me from where it's really going. Of course they're not going to destroy it, or something like that. But the ring, they're not even bringing the ring back to him. The ring's passing further and further away. Aragorn and co are going to go to, well, they're going through Rohan, but the plan was to go to Gondor, and Frodo and Sam are away in the other direction. The ring's gone, right? Saruman's lost, but this is his last desperate attempt, and he does not know as much as I think you're maybe thinking that he knows. So you're saying, firstly, assuming he was physically present, but was able to render himself invisible or cloud your senses to disappear. Okay, I'll let that one go because I kind of agree. I like to say sometimes a wizard did it, and in this case it was a wizard. If you're applying some sort of wizard craft to Saruman, I believe it, right? I know wizard in Tolkien doesn't really mean what it means in Dungeons and Dragons, but I believe that Gandalf, Saruman, Radagast, or whoever would be able to cloud your mind a bit, change perception. We talk about Radagast with shapes of hue and all that. It makes sense to me that Saruman could escape kind of unseen if he wanted to. That's not a huge leap. But there is a very interesting part I'm going to bring up about if Saruman was actually there. But you're saying, why didn't he just meet up with the fleeing group of orcs who had Merry and Pippin captive? Okay, so this is the part I can answer straight up. He didn't know. He didn't know about them. Gandalf, as he goes back as Gandalf the White, he's not Gandalf the Grey. Okay, Gandalf the Grey was kind of wrong sometimes in that, and I'm not saying Gandalf the White's perfect, but there's certain things he says where he's really aware of the mind of his enemies. He really understands them. He can perceive what they're thinking and what they're going to do in that. And he does this when he comes back with Saruman. So it says in the White Rider chapter that when he looked into Saruman's mind, Saruman had came forth to meet these messengers and spies. He doesn't know if the orcs were bringing anyone, and he doesn't know that the orcs were fighting orcs from Mordor and Moria, and he doesn't even know about the Nazgul, the winged messenger across the river. Saruman knows none of that. So instantly we're saying, why didn't he do this? It's like he didn't know. It's actually, it's when he arrives after the battle, and that's what Tolkien says when he was writing out his chronology. He states that in this day, Wednesday 30th or whatever it is, that Saruman appears on the battlefield and is seen by Aragorn and his companions at night. So it's not Gandalf, it was Saruman, Tolkien says. But he didn't know the things that I think you're maybe thinking that he did know. And if he did miss them by hours, which it seems like he did, and you said that seems like poor planning, definitely. This is Saruman not only being desperate, but being very impatient and not trusting his messengers to even just come back. He has to go and find out what's happening. He's so eager to get the ring and everything. He didn't plan, like, I'll meet you at this part of outside the outskirts of Fangorn or whatever. He didn't plan it that way. But he shows up at the wrong time. They've already all been wiped out. Well, most of them. And in the Palantir chapter as well, after they've went to visit Saruman, and Saruman saw that there's hobbits there and that, and he's like, what the hell? Gandalf talks about Saruman thinking, well, who are you? How did you come to be here? Why are you here? What do you know? Were you captured? How come you escaped and the orcs were all wiped out? Saruman doesn't know the answers to any of these questions. He's completely lost. And it's, you know, again, you're maybe saying afterwards he should have planned it better than that, but he couldn't. He didn't know as much information as you may be thinking. But for the last part, he said, if he was free to travel the land unmolested, why didn't he tell the Uruks to hold the hobbits somewhere safe beyond Rohan's borders so he could come get the ring? Okay. Firstly, he would definitely not tell the orcs that there was the ring there. They didn't know. Funnily enough, I would trust orcs to bring prisoners back untouched rather than trusting like men to bring back the ring. Do you know what I mean? It's Ugluk and his orcs are actually, they seem pretty loyal to Saruman, and they're very defensive when other orcs are wanting to eat the hobbits and find out what this elvish weapon is and all of that. They're like, no, Saruman wants them unspoiled, and they're going to do that. But your idea here where you're saying take them somewhere safe beyond Rohan's borders, how would that work? Because Saruman has no idea that they've even captured anyone and that they're on their way back. And if he didn't know that, how could he arrange to meet them somewhere? What if he went somewhere and they weren't there? What if he then left and they appeared 10 minutes later? It's like, you can't arrange when you have no idea if something's been successful or not. Plus, you have to remember, I'll shut up about this in a second, but you have to remember that at this time, Rohan was still pretty dangerous for Saruman's forces and everything, but it's probably the best time for his orcs to cross it, because remember, he's been corrupting them and through Grima Wormtongue and all that good stuff. He's, in his desperation, basically said, go and find this group that is traveling with this weapon, kill them all except halflings that you find, bring them back here as quick as possible. That's what he wants. And he sent these orcs that are relentless. They don't rest, right? They're going to just keep running, and that's his desperation, right? Yes, you're going to go into Rohan, but that's the quickest. That's the quickest way. Sorry about that. That's the quickest way, and all you can do is the elvish plot or other, as they're saying. So that's what he's wanting. It's like Rohan's the quickest way back to Isengard. Find them, cross Rohan, because it's the safest it's going to be for you, even though it's still dangerous. Get it back here as quick as you can. And that's what he's doing. And finally, I just want to cover this because this just kind of came up when you were asking that question. This idea that it was Saruman, okay, and you were talking about. I'm only mentioning this because you said assuming he was physically present, because there is an idea that Saruman wasn't physically present. And this is a really interesting passage from Tolkien, and it's in History of Middle Earth, Volume 7. But Christopher Tolkien expands on it a little bit. But okay, the idea is that there's conflicting narratives about the old man and Saruman being there, and it could be that all Aragorn and his friends saw was a vision of Saruman and not Saruman himself. So Tolkien did right. There's like a vision of Gandalf's thought, an important clue about the curious ambiguity surrounding the apparition from the night before. I didn't really know how to interpret it, but if you did, it's a new thought arising from Gandalf's suggestion that it was not Saruman himself, but a vision or wraith that he had made himself. The apparition is now to emanate from Gandalf, but of whom it was a vision, was it an embodied emanation of Gandalf? That's why there's the hat. Or was it because he said, I looked into the unhappy mind, saw his doubt and fear, and through his very deep concentration in trying to pierce the mind of Saruman and understand him, Saruman was projected as an image, briefly, that the companions saw. And he found no other evidence to cast light on the most curious element in the tale. So it could be that he wasn't actually physically there, and it was Gandalf. So Gandalf's still right saying, well, he didn't see me, but it was some apparition. So I think that's a really interesting thought, to be honest. So let's get rid of that one. thank you, members, for all those very interesting questions. Hope I answered them all right. So, let's see. I'm quite far behind with comments again. Melkor bred the dragons from the creatures of an early geological era, dinosaurs, explicitly in a letter. I've not read that explicitly in a letter. Are you sure you're not talking about those creatures that everyone keeps calling fell beasts, which is not the real name, but those kind of flying monsters? They're kind of talked about like that in a letter. This keeps refreshing. It's really annoying. Yes. I agree with this comment right here. Sounds like the toilet. So, if they wanted to include the Mouth of Sauron, they should have used black Numenorian. I was thinking about this today, actually. I don't know why, but it was such a missed opportunity. I think this was the great chance to show almost like a fallen Aragorn figure. Not as great as Aragorn, but you know what I mean? Someone who's greater than other men, but who went in the other direction. It should have been someone who... look, I've got images of Mouth Sauron that Ralph Damiani created that I really like, that kind of show this idea. So a bit withered, but kind of noble man who's clearly of Numenorian heritage, but fallen, and so used to getting his way when he talks to others that he's daunting. Like when he's an emissary, he must go and talk with people on occasion, and he's representing Sauron to such a degree that he's his mouthpiece. He's the mouth of Sauron, and it was such a good opportunity to show that and have him. He's so used to getting his way and daunting others because he's so great that he's taken aback when he's faced by Gandalf the White, and who he thinks is a lowly old grey wanderer from before. He's not. And Aragorn, the future king, and he's defeated through words and a gaze, which was a bit of irony there with Sauron would usually daunt with a gaze, and he as an emissary would daunt others with his words, and it's Aragorn and Gandalf that defeat him that way. They don't cut his head off, that's stupid, but they could have shown a black Numenorian like that, and that's a missed opportunity. They showed a big stupid goofy monster. They got his head cut off by a king with such a corruptive act that goes against all noble and good traditions, literally killing the messenger when you're going to be the future king of Gondor. Hello. I don't think I've answered one of your questions tonight, have I? Good to see you. Let's see. Do I think the music of the Ainur has notes that extend to the end of the world, or do you think the last notes are when the world is handed over to men, or something else? I think it's time. It's until the end of Arda. As we know, like, the Ainur and elves are bound to it until it lasts, and there's the whole idea that a greater music will take place. That is essentially the end of the world, isn't it? And I think the theme of elves and men's obviously in there put forward by Eru himself, but the music itself is existence. It's until the end of at least that period of Arda. Arda will end, but something even greater will come after it, and I think that's the whole music. The last note will be the end of Arda, but it'd be a happy note. It'd be with the hope that something greater will come after it. I think men inheriting the world is not the end of the story, so that's why I don't think that would be the end of the music itself. If that all makes sense. Ten comments, right? An easier one. What did Sauron gain by ensnaring Saruman through the Palantir? He wasn't dominated. He also doesn't seem to be depressed like Denethor. First thing would be that he would understand Saruman was, in his own right, a great power himself. Not as great as him, but if you could have Saruman on your side or against you, even though Saruman was still trying to work against him, wouldn't you want him on your side? And you could then, through the Palantir, know what he was doing. Yeah, you can keep track of Saruman. That's why he's so pissed off when Pippin looks into the Palantir and he's like, "Where have you been? It's been ages. You've not talked to me." He wants to know everything Saruman's doing. He's daunting him, and he's going to use him to. Obviously, we see keep Rohan at bay. That's a big one. He has a bit more knowledge about these western regions. He's not perfect, but Sauron's going to use that, and it allows his enemies to have to deal with Saruman as well. It's like almost like a kind of buffer. But he does fight battles that will still aid Sauron, but Saruman loses them as well. So I think he gains more than we maybe think. And then that all collapses when he learns that Saruman is still attempting to work against him, but it's kind of meaningless. It's, as we hear when Gandalf's talking about this, if Saruman did get the ring, Sauron would know about it and be like, "Okay, you're going to give me that then?" And Saruman would be like, "No." Sauron would just go and crush him. Isengard wouldn't stand against Mordor, as we're told. The child's flattery, we're hearing all that. Saruman's delusional that he still thinks he can challenge Sauron, and that eventually just becomes this idea of, well, I'll serve him, but eventually I'll be able to overthrow that, and he's delusional. But I think ensnaring Saruman stops him having Saruman as an enemy in his own head, and allows him to use the small empire of Isengard against other enemies. And it's just another force, another figure that Sauron's enemies have to deal with too. So he's on paper, he's a good ally, but he's a double traitor as well. I actually caught up with comments. I've caught up to the comments. That's not good. So, did I ever find out what a Mewlip is? No, but I think that video I did, was it like 5 minutes long or something like that Mewlip video. I just like to think of them as a horror story for hobbits. But like all good horror, it's probably influenced by something real, and that could be orcs or something worse. I like that. I like that idea. It's a kind of folk legend, but it's got some truth to it. And then they've just exaggerated it to the Mewlips, this absolutely horrible creature. And I like that someone it makes it the world's a bit too small. When someone says it could be Gollum it's talking about, that's quite fun to think about, but I don't like that idea really, because it makes it all a bit too small. It turns into that Star Wars thing where you've got an entire galaxy, but 10 people on different planets all meet each other when they visit other planets. It's a bit stupid. Who's my favorite Vala? Melkor. Melkor is my favorite. I like these characters, the evil ones, because there's a reason that they get that way. Who's gonna say like Irmo's their favorite? It's Melkor is like the one, isn't he? And it's he starts it all off. He's the big bad. He's got really interesting motives that change over time. And I just think he's the most interesting of all of them. He's the one that falls. And that's the most interesting thing to discuss. I really like ideas about Namo or Ulmo's relationship with men, like the race of men. That's interesting. I like all that. But Melkor is the one that I've made loads of videos about. I could talk about Melkor all day. He's not my favorite through his actions. I don't mean it that way. Just as an interesting character to discuss, he's clearly the one that you can talk about the most because of his actions. And I think he would be my favorite. Even when it goes from superior, unbelievable greatness and the greatest of all of them to absolutely pathetic in the end. I just love the whole fall of Melkor thing. Well, the answer to most of these, you said, do you plan to make a video about Middle-earth's cosmology, such as stars, planes, etc.? Since Tolkien constantly changed his mind about it, it's barely touched. Like most of these kind of questions about if I would do it, I don't plan on it, but I would do it. I think I did write about this somewhere, because someone, I can't remember who, someone asked about the void. There's this confusion about Ea and Arda, the timeless halls, and the void, and the door of night, all of this. This idea that there were two voids. There's like the void that's absolute nothingness outside of creation, then there's the void within creation that separates like planes of creation. All that is definitely something that would be good to what's flashing red on my screen? Something that would be good to plan out and work out. I'm very surprised if you're saying that it's not been talked about, because this is like lore stuff, isn't it? It's not really analysis. I'm surprised on our channel's not did it, but I definitely could and try and clear that stuff up, because it does get a bit confusing. Yeah. I'll say the famous words. I'll add it to the list. The list of unbelievable pressure with 1,000 videos. But why do so many artists in movies show Aragorn with a beard? I don't know. And it reached that point where when you do see Aragorn without a beard, even though he shouldn't, according to Tolkien, it looks weird. I don't even know if that's down to the movies. I think a lot of people would associate it with the movies. They do that thing where if anything deviates even slightly from how they look in the movie, it's wrong, which is stupid. But all the artwork I've seen of Aragorn, the ones that aren't even movie influenced, it always looks better with the beard, I think. And I'm not just saying that as someone with a beard. The John Howe image of Aragorn's terrible. See that one where he's not got the beard? He's it's kind of grim face like that. And I was like, that's one of the worst ones I've ever seen. John Howe's capable of way better than that. But yeah, I think people are just used to it. And nowadays, I think most show him with a beard because of Viggo Mortensen. That's a given, I think. But yeah, it's. Does it show like? Well, part of me might think it's a bit Jesus influenced, maybe, with the whole Return of the King and all that. It's like, or maybe there's a nobility about the beard. We're used to all these heroic king-like figures in our own mythologies, where there's a beard. It just shows this kind of wisdom and age and all that. If Aragorn's, I know we're told by Tolkien that he wouldn't have a beard, but Aragorn's in his 80s and it's like he's going to have a beard. It must just be something like that. It just kind of screams noble king if you have a beard, doesn't it? I think I did talk about Tom Bombadil earlier. Do I think Tom Bombadil is Father Time and Goldberry is Mother Nature? I do not. Definitely not Father Time. And Goldberry is Mother Nature, because what would her mother be then? Because she's the river daughter, Goldberry, daughter of the river. Goldberry being Mother Nature seems like such a lofty title for someone who's probably just a nature spirit, but it seems like I am an elemental force of existence or something. I don't really view either of them like that, in my opinion. Good question here. What was Morgoth's end goal? Okay, surely he knew that struggle against Iluvatar and the Valar was doomed. Now, I have definitely, I don't know if Patricia could maybe link it. I think it's a podcast. Yeah, it's called The Dark Lords of Tolkien, A Hopeless Conflict. It's episode 8 of the podcast. It's now on YouTube. I go into great detail about that, which is basically, why would Dark Lords who knew that Eru existed fight what seems like a hopeless cause? But I don't want to do a one-to-one here. I don't really think it is, but it is just like asking, why would Lucifer fight against God when he knows God exists and that God cast him down and all of that? Why would he fight against him? It's you have to kind of look at if we go back to Tolkien, you have to look at what they understand or misunderstand about Eru. So if you take Melkor. Look at what Melkor does and what Eru does to stop him. Now, what does Eru... When I say stop him, I mean step in to stop him. What does Eru do? He doesn't step in to stop him. That's not what Eru's all about. He does eventually be the one that gives the authority for Melkor to be cast out. But look at all the stuff I had before, because there's all this... I'm going to talk about this in my Manway video that I'm making, but there's the attempts to return Melkor to the good path. Tolkien says that Melkor has the right to exist. He actually has the right to use his power. That's a quote from this essay. Even if it's bad, and what we now define as bad, Melkor is allowed to do it because he's an individual being that exists. And if he just existed and did something bad and Eru cast him out of existence straight away, what would be the point of free will? That's essentially what Tolkien's talking about here. You can't really give free will and then say, but you must follow this path, because that's not free will. There are consequences for your actions. All the evil figures fall in the end, but you can't just force them onto a path, because that's a bit like when we talk about the music of the Ainur, and I think I've got a video where I talk about why the Ainur are also different, why they have different power and authority and all of that. And it's because if they were all the same and they all had the same purpose, and that purpose was known, why would Eru create them in the first place? Why wouldn't he just do the music himself? You have to give these beings free will, agency, let them do what they want to do, and that will create creation. That's essentially what they're there for. And then everything they imagine or put into it will become part of creation, the good and the bad. And then the role of Manway and the Vala as a whole would be to return this figure to goodness. That's what they aim to do. And that's why they don't do things like put Melkor into the halls of Mandos forever. They don't do that. They're not Melkor. That's the whole point. But anyway, getting a bit off course there. The hell's that? Morgoth essentially is able to do so much heinous, horrible stuff and not just be cast out. He's also at one point greater than the rest of the Valar combined. He seems to just think, well, I'm allowed to do this, and not understanding that he's creating his own doom in the end. And he fights against God, essentially. Everything he's doing is corrupting God's creation, fighting against him, lowering himself, dispersing his own power until he is powerless to be taken and punished for it. And with Sauron, he's a really interesting case, because not only does he know Eru exists and everything, he saw Morgoth being cast out and defeated. But so Sauron very slowly falls back into corruption, because he then thinks that Eru's abandoned, the Valar and then Eru have abandoned the world. Sauron eventually thinks that he has the authority to shape it to his will, because they've abandoned these people for what they've done, like men and elves and all of them. And why can't he just use his power then? Because he's allowed to do it. And then that's when he starts to think, when the Astari pop up, that the Valar are looking to have some sort of role in Middle Earth again, and he's delusional, and he loses in the end for it. So that podcast episode, which has been shared, thank you. I'll talk about that for 40 minutes, whatever it is. But that's it. It's hubris, ego, misunderstanding of Eru's actual role, which makes sense, because if they understood Eru's role, they wouldn't have fallen anyway. Because he's not directly stepping in to stop them doesn't mean that there's not some grand plan, So I'd recommend the video, because there's a lot more detail there, but I like those kind of questions. Oh, this keeps refreshing. There's a good question there. Jeez, there's loads of comments now. Stressed out my box. So, glowing. I wonder if that guy that harasses me through email that says I pronounce all the dwarf names wrong will come after me. Glowing says, do you think the theme of subcreation being inherently inferior to the prior element of creation is subverted somewhat by the trees seemingly being superior in all ways to the lamps? Well, it's not 100% that idea. It seems to be we're taking this as some sort of rule, but every single rule in the Legendarium always has exceptions. Beren and Luthien, the exceptions. It's Erendil being an exception, going to stepping foot in Aman and all of that. There's always exceptions to everything, and it's not a rule that every single thing created that's based on something before is worse. Because look at men. I know the men of the first age are incredible, the Edain and all of that. But then look at what it became. I know the Númenóreans fell, but the Númenóreans are the greatest men that existed, and they came from the likes of the Edain. So you have to, like, the lamps were made, but then from their destruction, there's like grief from it, but great works of creation influenced by the destruction and grief, like a new idea, you end up with something even greater. But then that was such an amazing creation, the trees, that they then can't be replicated. So sometimes it would be the great thing would be made from ideas put forward by something previous. It's not just the case that the older thing is always greater. Finwë was a great elf, and even though Fëanor fell, it's an understatement. Fëanor is considered possibly the greatest elf that ever lived. And if this whole idea was that everything was inferior from something before, the first elves would have been the greatest elves, and it's not how it works. You get that experience and conflict and discord and all this change that can then forge something brilliant after it. If this thing that you're saying was true, the second Arda couldn't be better than the first, but we know that it's supposed to be. So I wouldn't take this as a rule. Just like dwarves became creators of better weaponry and forging and that than even the Noldor, arguably, in certain ways. It's it's not a one-size-fits-all rule for everything. But the trees wouldn't have been created had the lamps not been destroyed. That's an important thing to think of here. And arguably, the sun and the moon aren't inferior creations. They could not be destroyed by Melkor, and they wouldn't have existed had the trees not been destroyed. So, no, in many ways they were even greater, but not in all ways. Mm-hmm. The question here, I don't want to bring it up on screen yet until I've got an answer, because I don't really know. What are my least favorite parts of the Legendarium? My least favorite parts. Jeez, what would that be? I do have an answer for this. I'll admit that even as someone who really loves reading everything about Tolkien and all of that, the mathematical stuff related to aging and time and all that, I think that's probably my least favorite. It's incredible, the detail and all that. I'm not saying it should be removed or anything, but I'm almost breaking out the calculator to just work certain things out. I think it gets pretty complicated, and I don't really need it for enjoying everything else. It's good to know, but I can't see myself ever making like a video or writing something about that first stuff you get in like the Nature of Middle Earth book. Even that got a bit kind of crazy when I was reading it, and I'm quite surprised at how complicated Tolkien made it. But it is kind of relevant if you're talking about this. How did time and all that work before we had a sun and moon, or the sun, I should say? That's interesting, because we also think of years with going around the sun, but time was a thing beforehand. It's probably that, and maybe the calendar stuff. There's the calendars chapter in the appendices. I definitely don't return to that all the time to read. Sometimes that gets a bit much. It's very detailed and incredibly well organized and written, but just in terms of I fancy opening up the appendices to read something, I'm not jumping at the chance to read the calendars part. Let's see here. Where did that question go? Jesus, stop refreshing. That's really annoying. Okay, found it. So apologies to Neil. Apparently I missed this one. Why Tolkien need to get rid of the two lamps in the round world mythology? It seems like they would have been compatible with the notion that Varda had been blessed with the light unsullied. Yeah, that stuff all changed, the light of Varda and everything. But I think the lamps, well, yeah, this stuff is tricky with the whole round world part, because it was early development, mistransformed, and everything was going to change. But Tolkien was also talking about they have to have that early conflict where Melkor is greater than the rest of the Valar and would force them out of Middle Earth. But of course, the lamps make more sense in the flat kind of world where they were placed and everything. I can't really answer on behalf of why you would feel he had to get rid of them. But there is some stuff with the destruction of the lamps leading to the breaking of symmetry, and maybe it didn't fit with I think he would have kept it in as some sort of Númenórean mythology, but it might not have been what actually happened, we say it that way. But there's nothing, Tolkien didn't explain why this would be the case. So I don't really want to put words in his mouth, but he must have had a reason. But unfortunately, I can't speak on behalf of him. But I do actually agree with your point there. And yeah, I agree with this. Melkor is fundamentally rebelling against the restrictions that Eru has placed on him. He cannot create life himself, only a mockery. Very similar to Milton's Satan. Yeah, that's it. It's the rebeller. It's what else can he do? It has to challenge Eru. Eru's the only one that's above him, and even with Melkor's all the gifts he was given, all those incredible gifts and power and authority, it's not enough. There's someone that's greater than him, and he wants. Why can't I have that authority? As soon as he's away searching for the secret fire and he can't get it, why can't I get it? And if you're then making these or creating these beings in this world through that power, I can twist it into something else. That's his kind of base motive, isn't it? Just looking for the next one. Least favorite parts. Aragorn was a ranger, a man who spent much of his time in the wild. The idea that he was always Gillette fresh seems fanciful to me. Yeah, this part of what Tolkien was saying about the beards thing is a bit weird. But it wouldn't be that it was Gillette fresh. It's just that he wouldn't grow a beard. It's the influence of elves in his genealogy and all that. It's not that he would have a big dirty blade that he'd be making sure he was shaved in the wilderness. It's that he would never need to because he wouldn't have a beard. I always imagine that at these times when Tolkien was writing, he just he's sitting one night and he goes, "I'm going to go and write about them not growing beards." I get what he was saying because it's a way to distinguish these great Numenorians who came from, if you go all the way back through Elros now, you're going to get an influence from elves. It's a way to distinguish them from other men. That's not just height and all that. It's like, well, they don't have beards either. But that's Tolkien. That's what he was going for. Tolkien says that Gandalf alone would pose a threat to Sauron if he got the ring and mastery. He doesn't speak about Saruman. Do you think Saruman could do it, knowing that he is more experienced? Is there more experienced in rings, just like ring lore and all that? Would Saruman pose a threat to Sauron? Okay, if that is the base question here, yes, I think he would. I think any of these beings with inherent greatness who have a motive for using it would pose some sort of threat. Do I think Saruman would overthrow Sauron? No, I think because by the time you don't master it immediately, it's one of these things where I think as Saruman would be trying to master it, he'd probably be overthrown. But if Gandalf had it, he would have the rest of Middle Earth on his side to attempt to overthrow Sauron. I don't think Saruman would, but I think anyone would be a threat. Elrond, Gandalf, even Aragorn. In a way, I'm not meaning that Sauron would be defeated, but as a threat, definitely these figures with the ring would pose a threat. Sauron feared this. He didn't fear the ring getting destroyed. He feared someone with power using the ring against him. And Saruman, definitely, like he's up for war. He's got armies, which kind of get wiped out with Rohan, but it's just a hypothetical here. I think the problem, well, not the problem, the idea that he's talking about Gandalf more is because of Gandalf is greater than Saruman, and Gandalf would use the ring in a different way. It would seem good, and others would follow him, and he would pose the biggest threat. Then I'd probably say someone like Galadriel, maybe. But Saruman, in terms of warfare and can you imagine Saruman with the ring projecting his voice? That'd be some weapon to use. The will that goes through his voice anyway, but he's now got the one ring. He would definitely trouble Sauron, but I still think Sauron would overthrow him in the end. Oh, but if you're asking, would he be able to master the ring? Yeah, I think these figures could all these great figures could master the ring over time, but the problem is Sauron is still there, and he's still got these huge armies, and it'd be very difficult to master it before he actually comes to claim it. Because remember, if you do master it, you wouldn't need to defeat Sauron because he'd be defeated just through you actually mastering it. In an ideal scenario here, the Saruman that we see in like the Two Towers, he's already fallen quite a bit. I don't really know what he'd be like if you get the ring. Yeah, that's an interesting thought. What Saruman are we talking about? Well, I've not heard anything about this one, but need some H2O. Right, what is this question about? Given the talk about Morgoth, what are my thoughts on the Rings of Power leak that Tom Bombadil and Goldberry, being Morgoth and Ungoliant, living out a sentence for their actions as forest spirits? I don't think that's the case. Just because of how stupid that is, but I wouldn't put it past them writing something like that, but surely not. That can't be real. Plus, Morgoth and Ungoliant weren't like a couple or something. Yeah, I can't really say much about that. I think that's so stupid, even for the writers of Rings of Power. I don't think that's the case. I think they're going to play Tom Bombadil straight, and I mean that as they're not going to mess with making him someone else, pretending to be Tom Bombadil or something. But from what I saw, I don't really know much about how they're using Tom Bombadil, but I saw images that they posted, and even the images, why does he look so grim? I think they're too cowardly and too scared to do a true Tom Bombadil, and I mean that like every single time he's on the screen, he's just singing and dancing. I don't think they're going to do that. Then you just think, well, what's the point? What's the point in putting him in there except for fan service? If you're not going to do Tom Bombadil the right way, just don't do him. He looks far too grim in those images. He should be like annoyingly singing and dancing, and that if it is fan service, that would be true fan service. I would respect them so much if every single time Tom was in the screen, he was just jumping around singing, and fake Gandalf, whatever that guy is just like, can we talk about this? This is really serious. And Tom's like, no. But they're not going to do that. I think they'll do the really cowardly thing and probably have him do a song at some point to go like, see, that is Tom Bombadil, he sings. But it's not enough. He has to always sing and always be annoying, but they're not going to do that. But yeah, what are my thoughts? I think even for the writers of Rings of Power, they're not going to do that. That's a bit too mental, that. This is a big one. I think I've talked about this in streams before. To what extent are the woes of Túrin a result of Morgoth's curse? If Morgoth has the power to affect reality in such a way, or Túrin's own arrogance and character flaws? I say I've answered it before. It is one of my actual favourite questions, and I still haven't even made a video about it. I think it's such a daunting subject that I'm always scared of making a really crap video about such a interesting subject. Okay, in my opinion, if Melkor was able to distort reality in a way where he could change the fate of a figure like Túrin, why would he have to ensure that his will is being acted out? So by that I mean, if he could just make Túrin suffer, or the children of Húrin suffer, why would he send orcs? Why would he send Glaurung to torment and attack and force misery? He could do that without declaring that he's the master of fate, couldn't he? To me, Morgoth is boasting about a power and authority that he does not hold. If he could hold such a power, we know about it from other figures and other events, but I genuinely do think that he would have willed it to happen and been willingly disperse some of his power into the sheer ambition that Túrin would suffer, and maybe that would have an effect in the world, because we are on Ardar, we are in the physical world, and he's attempting to have the earth itself, the physical world, act against this figure, possibly, right? But he's forcing it to happen. He's going out his way to have his will acted out, which is not the same thing as just declaring it so. But on the other side, I think you're right here when you talk about Túrin. Túrin makes this stuff happen as well. So it's not just Morgoth constantly trying to chase Túrin and bring misery upon him. Túrin causes his own misery as well, which, in an ironic way, if you look at it a certain way, is Morgoth's curse, isn't it? It's Morgoth's curse works, despite it not being him physically altering reality. But if it ends up happening anyway, then who are we to say that he didn't curse him? It's maybe Morgoth's so great that he could just tell Túrin, I am going to do this, and then Túrin, in an attempt to escape it, walks into it through his own bad decisions. That would be really, that's the way I kind of view it, and I think that's a really cool way to look at it. It's not one or the other. It's kind of a mix. It's kind of a mix of both. Hello, Richard. You said hello 20 minutes ago. Apologies about that. I don't think someone else mastering the ring would cause Sauron to drop dead or diminish. Yes, it would. It absolutely would. Tolkien says that the ring being mastered by someone else is essentially the same as the ring being thrown into the fire. If you bend the ring to your will, that power that was extracted from Sauron and placed into this object is yours. And Sauron has no connection to it anymore. That power that he took out of himself to place into Arda is now bent to the will of someone else, which means he doesn't have it, which means it's the same as it being destroyed. So that's what Sauron fears. He fears someone mastering the ring or using it against him at least, which could still cause him bother. But if someone did master it, which again, Tolkien's kind of saying he would challenge them before that. But if someone hypothetically managed to bend it to their will, Sauron's defeated. He is diminished. The result would be like we see at the end of, well, not the end, with the destruction of the ring in the Mount Doom chapter. It's the end of Sauron as a threat. Yeah, and then if you want to start melting your mind about if someone else bent that power to themselves, what would happen to them if someone bent the power to them? Would they just return to what they were, or would they severely diminish as well? Richard Harris. He's an actor. Harry Potter. Sorry for being late. Didn't know you were doing this tonight. Did you alive to change the name of the channel? I don't know what that means. You may have to clear that up for me, sorry. I love when you get a challenging question. It doesn't happen often. I somehow enjoy it. Well, that kind of question, there's always one of them in the stream. The problem with that question about the lamps and all of that is I don't think I can properly answer it in the stream offhand like that. It's quite an in-depth thing. You have to go and look at the whole Mist Transformed and everything that would change with the flat world being a mythology itself. It's quite hard to just pinpoint this is why Tolkien did it, because there's a whole volume of History of Middle-earth that's dedicated to changing the myth, isn't it? But yeah, those questions are good. What was the question? If I could ask Tolkien to clarify one thing, what would it be? Oh, I don't know, because from anyone who's watched my videos, I really like the mysteries, the unanswered questions. For example, I wouldn't ask him to explain what Tom Bombadil is or anything like that. I think he's written enough about him for him to be really interesting. I can't think of one question where I need to know the answer to that. What could it be? I'd maybe ask for a bit more detail something I find quite interesting. See the whole new Shadow thing, and he's like, "Oh, it's a bit too depressing. It would be too political and all that." And he abandoned it. I say abandoned. He wrote like 13 pages. I'd love to actually ask. Well, let's say you didn't abandon it and you weren't depressed by it. How would that play out? You know, something like that. I think that'd be quite interesting. Or some second age stuff, like more information about Numenor, Sauron's time in Numenor, and exactly when he thinks the fall was happening. I know we talk about the shadow appearing and everything, but I'd love to just ask more, get more information about Numenor and its fall, because it's still like limited to some pages, and it's my favorite story. That's probably the right answer. I'd, if you were taking a Calibeth and doing it as an actual book, which would be brilliant, how would that go? How would you divide that up? And more about Numenor. That's just what I want to know. There's not anything like what's Ungoliant, what's Tom Bombadil or anything like that. I wouldn't ask that kind of stuff. Why couldn't the eagles fly to? I wouldn't ask him that. Why do you think Eru made men most like Melkor of all the Valar? Well, remember, Melkor had a different role in the beginning. He wasn't supposed to fall or anything like that, but that kind of makes a bit of sense. He's not meant to fall. He's created with the free will to fall if he wants, and men do. I know elves have a couple of moments where it's counted as a fall as well, but men are most capable of it, but they're also capable of greatness. That's the whole thing. Is you can fall to the lowest depths or look at the heights you can grow to, and Melkor's the same. He could have been capable of amazing creation and starting these efforts of creation that the likes of Manwe would complete and all that. That's the ideal world, but he fell, and the first men fell as well, and you have that climb back up. It's not that I think when he made men, he's like, I'm going to make them like Melkor. It's just that's the way they end up. The path they took, they ended up being similar, and I think that would really frustrate Melkor as well, to be compared to men. But the fact that they were so close as well is one reason why Melkor was able to corrupt them so kind of easily, which he couldn't do with elves. And I mean corruption as in you will serve me and worship me and everything like that. You could do it with men. But then in the end, men overcome all of it and inherit the world. It's that whole, you're going to be given a position of authority, and will the power corrupt you? And in both cases it did, but men hopefully escape from that. He's obviously influenced by real men in the real world, and he's a Catholic, so he's believing in original sin and everything. He's going to make the most evil figure be somewhat relatable, but with a hope for men to rise above it. I think Glaurung was the weapon through whom Morgoth made his curse real, because Glaurung had some of his power. Yeah, we were talking about that earlier, weren't we? Again, though, I kind of think that if if Morgoth had the power he was claiming to have, he was exaggerating it. He wouldn't need to force it to happen. It would naturally happen. But he was commanding Glaurung to do stuff. That was kind of my point. It's a bit like when he's saying that he could pursue them in death. Everything he definitely can't. But he's not going to claim that he can't, because that limits his power. That limits his authority and influence. If he admitted that in death men are free from him, he's admitting that there's a power greater than him, and he doesn't want that. So I think there's a lot of kind of bluster and all that, but partly real. It's still happened, and he's still got some sort of power in the world because he's poured himself into it. So, like I said earlier, maybe having luck work against Turin, which in a way is like the curse, isn't it? I don't think I'd waste the question asking about Balrog wings because they clearly didn't have wings. I'll just say that. Start a riot in the chat. So, in 20 minutes, it will be... How long? Geez, it'll be 3 hours. So I think that'll be it. So there's a few more questions here I'll try and get through and maybe line up some other ones, but I might not get through everything. So I'm going to wrap up for 11 here, so 20 minutes max. So if you've got any other questions, just fire them in, but I might not get it this time. But hopefully you can ask for the next one whenever that happens. Let's see, where am I? I always love seeing that picture you have, your avatar, because it's such a weird hobbit in that animated film. What do I think happened to Radagast? Would he just stay in the woods forever until the end of times? That would be up to him, wouldn't it? It's, I think it's one of these things where if he did return west through his own will to do so, I still think he'd be welcomed and all that. Some people seem to think he'd be punished or something. I don't think so. It's not how the Vala would work. But I think he's clearly in Middle Earth because he's still happy there. He's got a connection to it, and in the end, maybe he'd fade with it or something like that. But why would he need to leave it? It's, he'd maybe just become some sort of folktale, the Wizard of the Forest, a bit like orcs fading and there's rumours of some creatures still about. Maybe like that with Radagast until he's just eventually no more. But from the end of the Lord of the Rings, I think he wouldn't have went back west because there's no need to. And I think he'll stay there until it's right for him not to be there. But some people seem to think Saruman killed him. I read that one. I think that was all the way back to the Korra days, where people would say weird stuff like that. But I don't think so. If something that extreme happened, I think Tolkien would have written it somewhere. But I think he's just completely not involved in the War of the Ring after he helps Gandalf, and he's off doing his own thing. Did Tolkien intend to flesh out the tale of Eärendil into a fourth great tale in length and significance, or would it still have just been another chapter of the Quentus Silmarillion? It's a good question. I don't really know. It's a good question, but that's such a significant event such a significant tale, as you're saying there. Even Bilbo's referencing it in the Third Age and with a huge epic poem about it and all that. I'd be very surprised if it wouldn't be its own thing. But a lot of these, it's a hard one because the Silmarillion was pieced together by Christopher Tolkien, and maybe all these great tales would have been just tales within the Silmarillion itself, but like Beren and Luthien would have been more than just a chapter. It would have been a huge section, a bit like they had different parts with Quentin Silmarillion, Akalabeth of the Rings of Power in the Third Age, which was also Christopher doing that. But they could have just had the Silmarillion being all these big stories on their own, and that would definitely be one that could be its own tale. But I'm unaware of any text where he says that was some intention, but that would have its place. That's how important it is, and it'd be very surprising if he thought something like the Fall of Gondolin was more important for its own individual story than Elendil, who's an unbelievable like mythological figure in the text. He is one of the few figures who deserves a whole story to himself. So I don't know about intention, but it would be one that would definitely work. Would I want to ask Tolkien more details about the War of Wrath? Precious little written on that huge event. Yeah, I always say this. That chapter's rushed, but it's heavily influenced by the last battle. It's Dagor Dagorath stuff. It's not surprising it's kind of rushed. I think Tolkien would have fleshed that out a bit. Christopher obviously didn't, because we're talking about the narrative and completing the story. He didn't want to add too much of his own, but I think the important stuff's there, though. I don't know if I'd want a lot of it fleshed out, because it is, again, I always use the word mythological. It is, though. Flying ships and giant dragons and earth-shattering conflict that goes on for years and then it's over. I wouldn't want a play-by-play for the War of Wrath, but I'd maybe ask things like, was Sauron there? We don't really know. Was he still hiding? Who exactly took part, and when did the Valar appear to actually take Morgoth back? It's like there's loads of stuff that Christopher kind of implied, and it's caused loads of debate. Maybe clear some details up, and make the chapter a bit longer, but not like I say, 60 pages of the battle or something. I wouldn't need that, but just clearing some things up and confirming that Calagon wasn't the size of a mountain, that'd be good as well. Why did Tolkien rewrite parts of his Legendarium so much? For example, changing the cosmology from a flat Earth to a round Earth. The Myth Transformed book talks more about this stuff, but it's very much tying the world he created into a mythological distant past of ours, and having it be less of a completely I want to choose my words carefully. If you read the Book of Lost Tales, it's very fairy stories, a little bit less grounded, and it's very mythological. Again, I'm using that word. And he started to, I don't want to say make it more serious, but there's a bit less of that as he goes forward. And he's fleshing out. It's quite good how he does it. He was fleshing out mythologies within the mythology, I love the idea that the flat world was mythology and the story. It wouldn't be removed. It would be a tale told by figures in the Legendarium. It's almost like when he was reaching the end of the writing, it was more impressive what he was doing with the Legendarium. But yeah, that's the kind of motive. It's certain events only work when something that he'd already written wouldn't be the case. That's why he was changing it. And then if you change that, you're changing this and you're changing that. So that was the big problem with the flat world, was he was changing the when men come into the world because they had to be corrupted by Morgoth at a certain time. But then what happens with the sun and the moon? And no wonder he stopped writing it, because it become completely overwhelming. You'd have to rewrite loads of stuff. But that's the motive behind it, and he unfortunately wasn't able to fulfill it. How do I think Baldor's legs were broken? Can the Oathbreakers interact physically? It's a good question. Well, we know from that the Beacon Hills of Gondor kind of essay that there was Morgoth worship going on in those mountains, and someone snuck up behind and attacked. His legs were broken. It was confirmed it was Baldur that was there. But for the Oathbreakers interacting physically, I don't know. It's possible if they'd the will to do it. I'm guessing. But I don't want to say for sure, because for the whole Oathbreakers thing with the ships, I don't think they physically interacted with the enemy at all. They would have terrified them and made them jump into the water, and they were all drowning and everything, but I don't think they were holding weapons and slashing at them. It's a power of kind of terror. So you're saying, I think Ben's saying that he tripped and fell. Maybe, it's like, or maybe there was figures who were still alive who were performing this dark worship in these hidden temples and stuff, and they're the ones that did it. But in this case, I would say let your imagination run wild. 29 months. It's unbelievable. Patricia is the oldest supporter of the channel. And even through all my jumping between channels and changing memberships every 2 days and stuff, still here. So thank you very much. The most elementary and valuable statement at the beginning of wisdom is, I do not know. As a Tolkien fan, each question results in more depth. Yeah, and I like to say I don't know as well. I don't want to invent. Sometimes I like to just say, this is what I think, or it could be this, but I'd hate to kind of make people think that I've got an answer that isn't there. And I also learn stuff from these kind of streams and questions as well, because I get asked things that I've not really thought about before, and I wish I had the time to put all these into like videos and stuff, because there's loads of good material here. I'm sure other channels will steal some good material, but yeah, it's there's nothing wrong with not knowing, and we're all learning. We're all learning stuff. It's actually been quite a good one tonight with the questions. But yeah, thank you for your support, and everyone else for showing up. We're almost wrapped up this one. First stream in a year, so I've been here for a while tonight. I wanted to get through everything, and I didn't know it was approaching 3 hours, but it's been pretty quick for me. Someone asked a question. Was Dragonfire Morgoth attempting to counterfeit the Flame Imperishable? Was this why some rings could be destroyed thereby? I never thought of that. But I don't think of the Flame Imperishable as being something like that. It's a bit like when they talk about Gandalf with the Ring of Fire and inflaming courage and all of that. That's what I think of flame. I don't think of it as a physical, real life flame that fires out or something like that. But maybe Morgoth misunderstood it and interpreted it that way or something. But the dragons, aren't they? You need fire. I don't know. I'm not going to say don't think of it like that. I'm not going to say it's wrong. It's probably interesting to think more on. Like we're talking about Morgoth with corruption and counterfeit. But he's got some association with fire anyway, doesn't he? It's Balrogs getting drawn to him and all that stuff. It kind of makes sense that dragons would have some sort of affiliation with it as well. And I agree with this. I know you really like the Tour story, but he went back and fleshed out his journey before arriving at Gondolin, big time. And I'd like to think he wanted to flesh out Erendiel's story too. But at the time, yeah, I think so as well. It's such an important story, such an important event. So much stems from it. There could be loads more about him arriving at Aman and the escape from Gondolin and maybe his upbringing. All that. There's so much that could get fleshed out in that story. And like I say, he's such an important figure in the myth that it would be strange if he couldn't have had that treatment as well, but it would all be fleshed out. Couple more, 5-2. Would you like to have seen a complete narrative of the Fall of Gondolin, considering what we have currently is a really in-depth retelling of the journey to the Hidden City and then only fragments? Yeah, the Fall of Gondolin is like the oldest story. If you've read the actual book, the Fall of Gondolin, you get all these different versions and the changes. It's quite interesting how different it is, and I think the latest one is good, but it's still very limited. Like you say, it's just fragments after they arrive at Gondolin. But if you're asking me if I'd like to see a complete narrative of anything, it'd be pretty much yes. I wouldn't say no to if Tolkien had written a full story of the Fall of Gondolin. But my favourite from the Great Tales would be the Children of Húrin. I'm really glad that we got what we got, rather than just what's in Unfinished Tales and a few chapters in the Silmarillion. Children of Húrin could even become a bigger thing as well. It's one of my favourite stories. All the Great Tales that were chosen are good enough for fuller treatment than we even got. How can myths around the Elder Days exist when the elves have first-hand accounts from those who witnessed it? Well, even the likes of the music of the Ainur, the Ainur and Dale, are told to us as myth. You have to guess that when the elves writing the Silmarillion were getting information from the likes of Manwë and the Valar, who took part in the music, but they probably wouldn't explain everything in great detail. There's a lot of stuff that would be beyond the comprehension of the elves, probably, and this is the essence of the storytelling throughout the whole Legendarium. It's, we're using myth in a very kind of specific way here. It's doesn't necessarily mean something that's not real. It's just the story, the way it's told. And I think we'd hear tales like, even if elves took part in battles against Morgoth's forces, you then get, this figure made this war cry this number of times after slaying all these figures. You start getting that. And you can get that today, stories that are kind of exaggerated for dramatic effect. I think that's the kind of myth I'm talking about. It's not necessarily this thing didn't happen. It's some good or bad event, important event, getting told to others through songs and stories, rather than just being written down. That's the way it would work in the Legendarium. You're still getting that all the way up to the Third Age and the end of the Fourth Age of the Red Book, and Aragorn telling stories and Bilbo telling stories about Erendil when Elrond's there. Surely Elrond knows more about Erendil than Bilbo, but that's myth, that's storytelling, and it's the way they're told. So it doesn't matter that there may be first-hand accounts. Those figures may have been the ones that were saying what they knew or reminiscing about an event, and then someone else goes and writes a story about it, and then that's what gets shared. It's elves seem to like that. They like the putting it into song and doing it justice, and instead of just Bilbo sitting saying, well, here's the story of Erendil, they don't need to hear that. They want it put into the way Bilbo actually presents it. And I think that's what we're really talking about here, in my opinion. So on that, I think we're done. Someone, do you wish me a good morning? Can we get the membership next month? Yeah, I've not plugged it. I don't like to do that. But yeah, there's if you like these kind of streams, I do this kind of one every month with Patreon members and certain tiers on YouTube. And yeah, they're every month. And not as many people as like showed up here, but they're still good. And I can go a bit more in depth with questions and that, because there's not many comments, because there's only a few of us really, but they're fun. So that's available for people. But as for these ones, I don't really know when the next one would be. I think familiarity would breed contempt. I don't want to do them every month or anything like that publicly, but I'm sure the next one won't be a year away. But yeah, I'm back on this channel. Hopefully there's more videos to come. And I think that's us for tonight. So thanks everyone who was watching, everyone who left questions and comments. I apologize if I missed anyone. I tried not to, but this chat thing kept on refreshing and going to the bottom, and I was scrolling back up to find it. I might have missed some questions. So hopefully next time you could maybe ask them again and I'll answer them. And when I put this up on YouTube, I'll have the painstaking task of going through all the questions, and I'll timestamp them for people watching. But that's us for tonight. So again, thanks very much. It was a good 3 hours. It's good to do this again. And yes, if I missed a question you really wanted answered when this is back up on YouTube, just put in the comments and I'll do my best to answer that. And that's it. So hopefully see you in the comments section or on Discord or on the next stream. So thanks everyone again, and I will see you all soon.